Well, good afternoon and welcome. Welcome to another in our brown bag webinar series. Webinar number 82 maybe? Got a lot of them that we've done over the last 4 years. But welcome, we have a great topic today, a great presenter, and a lot of learning opportunity for you to spend your lunch hour with. So hi, I'm Kelly Bearden. I am live from China Lake Naval Weapons Station in Ridgecrest, California, also known as China Lake. And we are on base for a Boots to Business and doing a remote webinar today. Our presenter, who I will introduce in a few minutes, is in San Diego. So we're covering the central and southern part of the state of California really well today. So before we get going, let's actually do this. Let's talk about the SBDC program on a national level. The SBDCs are funded to the tune of about 1,000 centers by the U.S. Small Business Administration. You'll find them in every state of the union, and you'll find a number of interesting ideas that come out of SBDCs. Including that is from our particular region in Central California. The Central California region goes from Mono County to the north to Kern in the south, Monterey the west, and Inyo County to the east. Covers 14 counties and is serviced by 5 SBDCs in Modesto, Fresno, Bakersfield, San Luis Obispo, and in Salinas. Contact them if you need service. And there's our vast territory. And right now we're located about right here, almost into Inyo County, right there in Ridgecrest. So webinar interaction today. So you're going to be muted. If you have any questions or if you need to communicate with us, please use your chat. If you look at your dashboard, you will see arrows, a right-hand arrow. And if you click on a particular arrow like chat or question, you're able to type in a response to us. Your questions are important to us, and we will be fielding them at the end of the webinar. So please, if you have a question, type it in and we'll try to get to it at the end of the presentation. At the end also, a survey will pop up, and your survey is important for a couple of reasons. Number one is it provides us information if you're interested in getting the slides. Our presenter has made it available to you after this webinar. You can get a copy of the handouts. And also, your feedback on future presentations and future webinar topics is really important to us. What we do is at the SBDC, we provide high quality and no cost confidential one-on-one consulting, training to small business owners on a variety of topics and mediums, in-depth classes, etc. And we do a lot of things. We do have a video here, and I don't think the audio is going to work today, but here it goes. And so there's our video. EDD mandatory e-file and e-pay are here now. So contact your SBDC if you have any questions regarding filing of payroll taxes on a quarterly basis. If you have over 10 employees, it's required now. Fewer employees, it'll be January 2018. Okay, now on to the main part of our presentation today. Enough of the preliminaries. Let's get on to the main event. Dr. Martin Kleckner has a very specific background in 26 years of management and senior level, various different types of industries. He's really an SBIR, STTR expert. He can tell you exactly some of the fantastic projects that he's worked on. He has his MBA from the University of California, Los Angeles, a number of undergraduate degrees as well, including economics from Whittier College. And Dr. Kleckner, it's a pleasure to have you on today. Thank you for joining us.
Kelly, thank you very much indeed. What do I need to do to get me to... Oh, here I am. Can everybody hear me? That's the obligatory question.
If I can hear you, everybody can hear you.
Everybody
so you're sounding good, loud, and clear.
Okay. And great. So let me... One more administrative question, and that is the right column. Should I keep that on in order to view any questions or comments, something like that, or should I click it off?
Martin, the dashboard oftentimes gets in the way for some of our presenters. If you use your right-hand arrow, that will get rid of it. And I will be fielding the questions to you that everybody asks after the webinar. So
got it. When
you're ready, proceed.
Okay, let's go. Well, folks, thank you very much indeed for joining me. I know you probably have a heck of a lot of better things to do rather than spend time with me, so I'm honored that you could join me. Just a little bit of a background with regard to what I do to stay out of trouble. I'm a member of the National Science Foundation, what's known as adjunct faculty, and I have been over the past several years teaching and facilitating something called I-Core, Innovation Core, and we'll chat a little bit about that toward the end of the slide deck presentation here. And those are the universities that I periodically get involved with regard to I-Core and SBIR, STTR. I have clients or have applied for and won grants from those federal agencies that you see before you, and have been teaching this topic at the University of California systems, most of them, most of the universities, and also with Cal State University. Have experience with congressional funding as well. Some of you may know or may not know that each senator and each member of the House of Representatives has special designated funding as well, and so I've been able to take advantage of that. I'm an NIH SBIR reviewer with regard to commercialization, and over the past 15 to 18 months have been fortunate enough to win a little bit over $30 million in federal grants and in private equity as well. 5 startups, 2 of them fared a little bit better than the others, but you know, sometimes, as we all say, we learn a lot more from those that didn't work than from the ones that did. Really important in the workshop that I give nationwide is that you folks are actually the star of the show, and under other circumstances I would be encouraging you to do the lion's share of the conversation, but we're not able to take advantage of that opportunity today. Typically what I do is, although we only have about 30 to 40 minutes today, but what I'm going to be sharing with you then will be at best the tip of the iceberg, just a microcosm of what I typically provide throughout the state of California. And you see those before you, and they take about 16 hours and change. So we do a pretty aggressive, intensive deep dive. As you can see, it also includes, in addition to SBIR and STTR, a lot of participation in I-Core, and also preparing for and communicating and winning private equity from angels all the way through VCs. Special emphasis also on research, design, and study approach, accounting, budgets, and so forth. And that's because most of us, frankly, are not trained in that space. So with the limited amount of time that we have, Bare Essentials is absolutely the truth for today, and we're going to cover very, very briefly those 6 topics that you see over to the right. Not nearly enough, but we'll do the best that we can there. So let's start with the basics and orientation. And for those of you who are not familiar, both SBIR and STTR have indeed been around for quite some time. SBIR for about 35 years, and STTR, the distinguishing characteristic between STTR and SBIR is that the STTR actually requires your partnership with a not-for-profit research institution such as a research university or a federal
Martin,
yeah.
Let me interrupt you for just a second.
Sure.
I think there's a diagonal box that you need to click because I don't think we're seeing your screen yet. It says, would you share your screen? And then we're good to go and continue.
Okay. Where is that diagonal box?
Should have popped up and said, share your screen.
Okay, I thought it did. Show screen. How about this? Let me try that. Is that helping?
Well, I saw it flash by my screen. There it is. You're good.
I am good to go? Okay. Let me, I'm not going to do that. Okay, as long as we're good, I'm not going to mess with anything else. I'm just so afraid of clicking on the wrong X. So apologies, folks. So we're all good to go. We can see the screens now. Good to go, Kelly?
Yes, it's good.
Okay. Okay, fantastic. Okay, so let's revisit again the SBIR and STTR, and as I was indicating, the distinguishing characteristic between the STTR from the SBIR is that the small business tech transfer actually calls for, requires us to participate with a university or a federal lab or a not-for-profit research agency. And of the budgets that are allocated on an annual basis to agencies that I'll show you on the ensuing screen, we, as small business concerns, get to enjoy about 3.2% of that for extramural research from all 11 of these agencies. And then there's also for STTR, of which only a few agencies participate in, we get about 0.45%. You all may think that's a little bit light, but these are restricted to the 5 largest agencies who have a research budget north of $1 billion. Okay? All right, next slide. Here we go. Okay. Well, so that's who's playing. It takes me a while, I think, to transition. There are 11 agencies that are involved, and I've designated with a check mark the 5 largest ones who participate with STTR. There really are 3 essential missions for this program. Is that SBIR projects must have a high-risk innovation, which another way of saying is that private equity angels and so forth will view these ventures as probably a little bit too rich and too risky for their participation. So the federal government has had to jump on the bandwagon to handle the very earliest stages of these risky ventures. Strong chance for commercialization sense, and the objective also here is that we want to stimulate the economy, we want to generate job growth, and lest I forget, we also want to generate taxes to go back to Washington, D.C. So here are the essentials. Phase 1, Phase 2, Phase 3, as you can see down below. Phase 3 is no funding coming in our direction, with the exception of the DoD, which I'll chat about ever so briefly. But Phase 1 is proof of concept, it's proof of principle, and in many respects, it's a sniff test. For those of us who are awarded a Phase 1, we're being evaluated almost from the get-go on whether or not we're going to be transitioned into Phase 2. But it's a proof of concept again. It's to prove our worth, whether or not we can handle a small amount of money. And you can see the amounts there, anywhere typically from $75,000 to $150,000. For some agencies, for some projects, for some funding opportunities, we can go as high as $225,000. I will say, however, one venture out of UC Merced, we were able to get a little bit north of that at $257,000 for a life science project. With regard to Phase 2, This is distinguished from feasibility and proof of principle, proof of concept, into proof of efficacy. This is where we really get into the more robust deep dive efficacy and potential and so forth. And for two agencies, the ones that have the most comprehensive and the most complex initiatives, no surprise to you, would be, of course, the NIH for life sciences clinical trials, but there are very complex and comprehensive projects that are being funded by the Department of Energy as well. So there are special funds to motivate additional participants, in particular for energy savings, for smart buildings, for example. The DOE is striving to motivate universities to get more involved. And then there are supplemental fundings as well, and I have a separate slide that will chat about that, but they can include matching funds above and beyond what we receive for phase 2. And as I indicated, while we do not get funds for phase 3, we do get a myriad of support from a variety of other resources, such as consultants, mentorships, accelerators, incubators, and so forth. So to be eligible, we all have to be a for-profit, no not-for-profits involved in this case. Most of us, I think, qualify for the no more than 500 employees, so I think we luck out there. Over 50% have to be directly owned or controlled. And what I mean by resident aliens, we're not talking about the coneheads or creatures from the planet Zircon. These are green card or individuals who have at least served or been a resident of the United States for 183 days or north of that, including this year. Likewise, the same requirements are for any joint venture company with which we work, and we can subcontract about a third of that. Now, there are some questions with regard to who will be our PI, and what we really mean here is that 50% or greater than 50% don't necessarily have to be a true employee of ours, but they have to be greater than 50% in terms of dedicated to us. So what this means is that they can be a 1099. They can only be involved in our projects to the extent of the time of the award and then through the completion of the last deliverable, but no more than that. If you choose, however, that you both like each other and this individual would like to stay with you longer, that's certainly up to you, and you're more than welcome to it. Now, with regard to the STTRs, again, as I had indicated, these involve partnerships with a university or another not-for-profit research institution. We still have to be for-profit. We cannot have employees exceeding greater than 500. And again, as I had indicated, we do have to have a research institution partner. The complicating factor here is that we must have an IP agreement signed and included as part of our application for the SBIR. Every research institution has a template. We don't necessarily have to comply with that template, but we do need to negotiate and we do need to sign that off. And there are percentages in terms of how much each of us needs to perform or can perform. And what you're seeing there is that the company, we as the SBDC, the small business concern, can perform as little as 40% of the project, and the university can perform as little as 30%, which means it opens up an additional 30% for anyone with whom we may want to subcontract. And as opposed to an SBIR, the principal investigator or the investigators do not need to be primarily dedicated to our company. So let me share some other things with you. There are cross-program awards, which means that if we apply for a phase 1 and get awarded either an STTR or an SBIR, we can switch from an SBIR for phase 2 to STTR, and conversely, we can do the same thing, STTR to SBIR. We can also, by the way, if we win an NIH, for example, if we choose to switch to, say, the National Science Foundation for phase 2, or the DoD, or conversely, we can do that if we justify our reasons for doing so. I have put a square around direct to phase 2 because at the particular moment in time that is not existing, although it is still being considered in the Senate, and we'll chat about that a little bit further. All phase 1 employees, awardees rather, this was not always the case. If you have been awarded a phase 1, you are allowed to apply for phase 2, no restrictions whatsoever. And as I had already indicated, at least with the DOE and the NIH, there can also be a phase 2B award due to the high capital intensive cost and also the complexity of the initiatives for in addition to a phase 2A, a phase 2B. Clinical trials is the obvious one that comes into play, but there are also very intensive energy projects that will also require funding, or at least allow for funding for a phase 2B. These next two slides, they pertain to what was tantamount, at least in the past, to some abuse of the phase 1 program, where there were various companies around the country who were making a living almost exclusively on phase 1 awards. So there are two benchmark performance requirements, transition rates, that are now required, and for the most part they don't apply to us unless we have actually been awarded 20 or more phase 1 awards. And what that means is that of the at least 20 phase 1 awards that we have received over the past 5 years, 25% of them must have been awarded a phase 2. And likewise, for commercialization, for those of us who have been awarded a specific minimum number of phase 2 awards, in this case 16 or more, we have to have received an average over the past 10 years of at least $100,000 in sales and or investments per award, or a number of patents that calculate to ballpark around 15% of the number of awards. And when you do the math, these are really hardly strict requirements. I mean, what is 15% of 16? I think that's about 2.5 to 3 patents being awarded and $100,000 in sales on average. I would hardly consider that big of a deal. However, while it is a fact that if we do not meet either one of those two requirements, while it is true that they will send someone out and yank us by the ear, what's really more important is that they do keep track of us, and every June they'll calculate the metrics on us. And if we do not comply with each one of those transition awards, we are no longer allowed to apply for any more phase 1 awards until we get our act together. To that end. Now here's something that I was particularly excited about, and that is in 2016 there were two bills pending, one by Gene Shaheen, a Democrat from New Hampshire, and Steve Chabot from Ohio, where we were going to be raising the percentage of awards from the prior percentages that I had conveyed to you in an earlier slide to these numbers. Very exciting stuff. Well, bad news, that's not going to happen. What happened in December is that they were not even reauthorized, they were just simply extended. And so we're staying at 3.2% for SBIR, and we're staying at 0.45% for STTR of all of the extramural research funds that are awarded to each of the agencies. And perhaps most of you know we're still in a little bit of a holding pattern in terms of the national budget for fiscal year 2018. So the base program still remains, but however, as part of that hiccup is that some pilot programs are expiring. And one of those, which I think might be of interest or might have been an interest to all of you, especially if you have done what you may consider phase 1 equivalent work that you can share with the funding agency, is that there was a direct to phase 2. Right now, that's not the case. That being said, however, Gene Shaheen's staff had indicated to me when I was back there in May that it is still pending in Senate appropriations, but don't hold your breath until other issues are taken care of. So these two areas, direct to phase 2 and phase 0, that's not a typo, proof of concept partnership, which really means is that several agencies, DOD, NIH, NSF, and others, if they take a keen interest in your particular initiative or venture, there are or had been incubators and accelerators and a myriad of supports and services and also connections with VCs and angel groups in order to hopefully expedite or accelerate your progress in commercializing your venture, drawing across that valley of death which you're all familiar with. These two, however, programs from the DoD did pass because they were attached as riders to the most recent 2018 and beyond DoD defense budget. So they were snuck in there, and so the DoD Commercialization Ready program means that readiness program means that if any of you have received or are receiving funding from the DoD, and if they take a great deal of interest in your initiative, they will be providing you with a lot of additional support in order to move you forth. And as opposed to the phase 3, where for all the other agencies that I had mentioned that do not receive capital funding, for the DoD, they have something called the Rapid Innovation Fund, which actually does include capital support to take you through and across the commercialization phase. So that's very good news. And I had mentioned to you also about supplemental funds. And for those of you who are thinking about getting funding from my National Science Foundation, the NSF has what are called matching funds. And this pertains to phase 2, however, not to phase 1. But on or about maybe 2, possibly 3 months prior to the completion of your phase 2 work, if any of you have received any amount of private equity funding, the NSF will fund up to 50% of your third-party investment funds, up to $500,000. And I have several clients who are able to take advantage of that. Likewise, if you form a commercial or a strategic partnership during phase 2, and the objectives may be the continuation of additional research that was not funded by your phase 2 grant, this can also include other initiatives relative to production, manufacturing, engineering, distribution. The NSF will also fund or support that in supplement up to an additional $150,000. And then for those of you who are interested in perhaps bringing on board someone who may be able to help you with corp dev, business development, and so forth, they'll ante up an additional $10,000 to support your cause there. So those are what I consider to be pretty exciting stuff. I don't know if any of you are at a stage of engaging VC, hedge fund, or private equity funds, but this gobbledygook that you're looking for here, I would just simply suggest that you understand all of this, that if any of you are considering VC involvement, the rules are that no one VC can hold a majority share in your initiative unless, and this is part 2 at the bottom, the VCs are owned and controlled by one or more U.S. citizens or permanent resident aliens. But just simply keep in mind that the specific requirement is that no single VC can own over 50% of your venture. And with regard to STTR, in the words of the Sopranos, just forget about it. It's too complicated, especially when you are having a partnership with, say, the University of California or elsewhere. So that's not going to work. So let's take a look at the numbers. All things considered, not too bad, I suppose. This is for 2017, which is wrapping up at the end of September 30. And so those are what the numbers look like. I cannot vouch or state that these will be the same numbers that are going to be for 2018, but I would suspect that at the very least we'll flatline and stay the course with these numbers. But again, I am not certain if that really is going to be the case because of this thing here. And some of you may have heard about it, some of you may have read about it, but the 2018 budget with regard to those numbers that I had shown you in the prior slide, but for the overall research budget for each one of these agencies is being confronted right now, and so there is a potential risk of each one of these agencies overall, their extramural research budgets of, and I sure hope this is not the case, will be dropping by those percentage points that you see on the leftmost column. Let's cross our fingers and hope that that is most likely not going to be the case, but it would be an overall 17% proposed cut. So with regard to our 3.2% and 0.45%, what that means is that we would also take a haircut as well. So let's hope that doesn't come into play. Let's take a peek at where the interest is right now with regard to 2017 and most likely moving into 2018. I don't know if any of you are in the asteroid capture business, but there's money available for you there, believe it or not. So these are generally what the agencies are looking for. That being said, however, that doesn't necessarily mean that you need to restrict or constrain your initiatives to cover these particular topics. So don't worry about that. These are general indications of interest, but that does not mean that your innovation has to be whatsoever complying with those particular categories. And this is likewise for the NIH, and should probably come as no surprise to you with regard to genomics, proteomics, telehealth, of course, and the list goes on there. Department of Energy, big deal on clean energy technologies, anything that will convert us from our dependence on carbon. And so those are the big three goals there. And I had mentioned, I think, prior that there are special funds there for any of you who are looking into cutting the deployment of the use of energy or the cost of same. The DoD actually is offering special funding for your strategic partners and you to fortify and accelerate your efforts in that space. So something to look forward to as well. So here are some examples of the projects that I've been working on. And yes, as a matter of fact, there really was an NSF grant offered for exotic bird stimulation, believe it or not. For those of you who maybe have exotic birds, you know they are very intelligent creatures, and so even if they're in a very large cage, they can go insane. So there is actually NSF funding to support their stimulation. And I'm only kidding about the asteroid mining. I'm just hoping that one of you out there is going to get into that business. So here's what the phase one success rates, and some of you may say, well, gee, Cliff, no, that's not so hot. Well, I would offer you to compare that with what the odds of getting funding through private equity angel, and for those of you who are familiar with that, compare these with what the angels may tell you, and they'll say it's 5%, and I'm going to tell you it's somewhere around 1% or less. So all things considered, the odds of a phase one chance of success for your work, as far as I'm concerned, are fairly decent, and they're probably not going to change. I also wanted to call your attention to this, and we spend a lot of time on this in terms of writing for the reviewer. But you'll notice that even though these columns may have different lengths, each of these 4 agencies and the other 7 as well are essentially looking for the same criteria in order for you to win the day. You'll see study approach with the DOE, you'll see approach under NIH, you'll see scientific excellence under defense, and you'll see creativity and so forth, intellectual merit under NSF. So they all are very comparable. Significance, by the way, under the NIH and for any of the other ones, and likewise for innovation, even though they say significance, that does not necessarily mean that it has an impact on a large or a significant percentage of our population. It just simply means how significant is it in solving a problem that we have been grappling with that has not been answered right now. So don't consider that as a percentage requirement. So those are all the things that you need to consider and include in your proposal as you are writing your proposal. I highly recommend that before you even do a deep dive into completing templates and writing your proposal, that you amass your team together in advance of applying for an SBIR or an STTR, and consider very carefully and very serious these questions. What are you going to do? Why is it so important? Why indeed would it be significant, innovative, and so forth? Who's going to do what and why, and how much is it going to take? These are something these are all areas that you need to pay a great deal of attention to, because you're going to be scrutinized for that in your proposal. And for all of you who are considering an SBIR, you do need to recall that the R for both SBIR and the R in STTR, that stands for research. And so these are still, even as we are for-profit business entities, these are research projects. So for any project that you want to get funded, you have to have a key question or a few key critical questions that you want to have answered. And you're going to be asked to indicate what you already know, what has been published out there, what studies have been conducted, what has been in the market to date, what works, what doesn't work, and so forth. What is the unmet need, missing information, and relative to that unanswered question that you need to address, what are your aims, what are your endpoints, what are your statistics, and so forth, and what do you feel will be the ultimate impact of your project? And likewise, another way of looking at that is that if you were not to initiate your project, if it was not to get funded, what would be the repercussions or the ramifications of it not occurring? So all very important. So your reviewers really need to be crystal clear on this. What is your research question? Why are you asking that question in the first place? What are your aims, originality, relevance, and how are you going to fill the gap in solving the problems that we are encountering right now? I'll tell you right now that for the clients with whom I've worked, and I've had about a little over 50 right now that we have gone after and pursued SBIRs and STTRs, is that these are deal killers for most of us. And the reason is, I would imagine to most of you, fairly obvious, is that as opposed to those PhD types, most of us have not been trained in terms of how to design research, how to create a study approach, and how to do all of these things. So that being the case, as far as I'm concerned, and for most of my clients, I may lovingly and in a warm and fuzzy way suggest that maybe we fortify your team, that even though it is not required as they are within STTR, that we may want to find someone from a not-for-profit research entity, a university, and so forth, in order to do the things that you're seeing in front of you right now relative to design, procedure, and analytics, and so forth. Bring someone on board who is trained. If you need to have a biostatistician or something like that, just do it. I can assure you unequivocally that there are researchers at universities, including postdocs and so forth, that would jump at a chance, especially if the project that you're working on is of great interest to them. They'd be very happy to jump on the chance of working with you, if for no other reason that the lion's share of the grant may be going toward them. Graphics, extremely important. Gantt charts and so forth, very easy to read. Reviewers are usually washing their car on a Sunday, and once they're done with that, they march into their office and go through your proposal. If you can provide them with graphics, Gantt charts, things like this, much easier to read, and they sincerely appreciate it, and they're able to make a decision that much more expeditiously. I can't underscore enough the importance of your team, and for my role, if I feel that I need to help you in fortifying your team, I most certainly will do that. And I think most of you are very open-minded to allowing that to come into play, in particular as it pertains to perhaps having a co-PI, a co-principal investigator for you. Now, this is my wimpy attempt at a sense of humor, and most people don't like it. You're probably too young to remember, treasurer of Sierra Madre. So budgets, just consider that as a word replacing. I don't got to show you no stinking budgets. But one of the other areas that we get hung up with are rates and budgets. And one of my clients, and I blame it more on me, quite frankly, than I do on the client, is that for an NSF grant, we overshot the $225,000 mark for a phase 1, and were automatically rejected before the high caliber proposal was even read. So that was indeed a heartbreak. So any questions that we have whatsoever with regard to how much do we charge for a particular initiative within our budget, how much do we pay, how high can we really go in our budgets to fund this particular phase 1 project, and are there indeed things called a hard cap waiver, and we need to confirm that up front. A hard cap waiver means that the SBA in some instances will approve up front the opportunity for us to exceed the $150,000 or up to $225,000 for our phase 1 budget. Many of us also get confused about having a proper accounting system. So these are all very important considerations that we have to have answered and be crystal clear on before we submit our proposal. Registration, extremely important. It's kind of like pulling teeth, but not really. We have to register with 6 separate entities. And for those of you who are interested, I have a fairly straightforward, at least I think it is, a guide on how to walk your way through that. It says it can take 6 to 8 weeks. That's not us. It doesn't take us that long to do all the registration. We can get ours done in a matter of minutes. It's the work that they have to do for background checks and everything else back in Arlington and in other parts of Virginia and Washington, D.C. and Maryland before they give us clearance to apply for that. The reason why I'm offering these slides to you is that for those of you who would like, these are online access sites for you to do your deeper dive into DUNS and SAM registration, grants.gov, ERA Commons, which pertains expressly to the National Institutes of Health, and of recent vintage SBA registration. And there are comprehensive guides, and they're a lot scarier than they really do appear. But for the most part, even though they are really good candidates for a doorstop, I'd also encourage you to read through them, in particular for questions that many of us may not consider in terms of format of each page, margins, spacing, font, even stuff like that that we may not even consider. So all very important. But even before that, I would highly encourage you all to take a look at this site, and in particular those 4 bullet points that I have down there below. The general questions, very helpful. I mean, they will not take you to deep dive answers, but they will take you a long way to answer questions that you may have. Likewise for eligibility. The tutorials are great, and they also do have a variety of tools that you can use, including answering the questions of how much would you pay a particular researcher, how much would you pay to do a particular project relative to, say, finishing a prototype or something like that. Extremely valuable. So I would highly encourage you, all of you, to take a look at those four bullet points. Well, I'd be drummed out of the I-Corps core, so to speak, if I didn't talk a little bit about what I also do for a living on the side. So I don't know if any of you were philosophy majors in undergrads, but if you were, you are probably familiar with the great work of Professor Michael Tyson. But for any of you who have ever done a business plan and a financial statement that goes along with those business plans, yeah, you know one thing that is an eternal in perpetuity, universal truth, and that your business plan is automatically wrong before the ink dries, and likewise is the financial plan. And in fact, as far as we're concerned, business plans are not appropriate for startups, and neither are hierarchical charts, by the way. And so you might be also familiar with these riffs on that. Helmut von Moltke, a World War II general, and for those of you who are familiar with ICOR or Lean Launchpad, you're more than likely familiar with Steve Blank's comment on no business plan survives first contact with customers. So we have a funded, by the way, opportunity for those of you to get involved in something called ICOR, and you can apply in advance of submitting an application for an SBIR, but many of you who will be awarded an SBIR grant may most likely be offered an opportunity to participate in this program as well. And this is with regard to the research and development of a business model, and many of you have probably heard of the business model canvas. These are 7-week, rough, tough, hard to bluff, rigorous, we aren't just a woofing, grant-funded cohorts, depending upon the agency that you are working with. You can get funded anywhere between $40,000 to $50,000 to $70,000 to participate in these programs, and they are located throughout various parts of the United States. And in fact, I did my training back in Arlington with the NSF, and as I indicated, I think in that first or second slide of mine, have also been participating and teaching it at SC, Caltech, and Georgia Tech, and a variety of other research universities as well. So the objective here is for you to undertake what is called discovery and validation, or to translate that into somewhat English, is that you will be mandated to conduct experiential interviews with targeted or hypothesized customer segments relative to a value proposition, and then there are 7 other business components on that chart. And you go through a rigorous 7-week program, as I indicated. You come see us for 4 weeks for an orientation. We send you out, God bless, Godspeed, and you report back every Wednesday for an entire day, and tell us where you've been, how you got there, lessons learned, and everything else, and we will we'll grill you in terms of the caliber of the work that you've done and so forth. And so there are nodes all over the place, and in the state of California, no shortage. There are 2 nodes up in the Bay Area, Berkeley, Stanford area, and also UC San Francisco, and down at LA it's Caltech, UCLA, and USC. But there are also a bunch of sites all over the place. And so where I am in Southern California, I work with those 4 universities. Yeah, here in SoCal. So, gee, you know, I wish I could go a lot more deeper with you, and I sincerely apologize that I am not able to do so. But you know, Kelly, those 4 deep dive workshops that I had mentioned in the first or second or third slides, maybe we can finagle a way to make those happen up in your neck of the woods, you know, sometime in 2018 if there's any interest to do that. Do we have time, Kelly, for any questions? Or maybe by now everybody's already hung up on me and gone off somewhere, but if there are questions, I'll be very, very happy to answer that. So there's an audience question: will a replay be available? Yeah, so there's the answer already. Absolutely. And I did indeed provide Kelly with a copy of these slides, so you are more than welcome to have access to them. And don't hesitate for a second, by the way, everybody, that if you wanted to reach out to me with a question, I have there my email, and I have a telephone number. Just don't call around 2:30 in the morning. even though I may be up. We'll just wait for daytime hours. Any other questions that I can possibly answer? If you don't have any, I certainly don't blame you.
Martin, we have plenty of questions for you.
Oh,
we have
fantastic.
20 questions, and we have 6 minutes to get through them. So
okay.
Let's start here with the first one. The first one is going to be, it's a little specific, but will commercial space, and it's asked by Kelly, and I must add there are more Kellys than any other first name on the webinar today.
Hey, there's no shortage of Kellys. Yeah.
Not today.
Okay.
So will commercial space transportation industry projects be addressed by the SBA or SBIR, STTR granting in federal year 2018?
The question, let me see if I can repeat that. Will the DOT be offering SBIR grants for 2018?
Yes.
Is that right? The answer, as far as I'm concerned, is yes. Yes, there will be. And for what I would consider to be obvious reasons. Autonomous vehicles. And that is huge. So I do have a client, former professor out of UC Irvine, where we are indeed working on 2017 grants for DOT. And I apologize, folks, for not including DOT, but I can certainly assure you, even though all of these agencies are under duress right now, the DOT will have funding available. I hope I don't live to regret that. And providing funding for things such as autonomous vehicles and others that are very, very germane and of pertinent of interest.
Now, Martin, reading the question a little closer, it says, will commercial space transportation, so it could be a NASA project, commercial space transportation industry projects be in 2018?
Well, I can guarantee you that NASA will be funding as well.
Okay, great.
Yeah, no question about that. I'm not entirely clear on what you mean by commercial spacing, but I can tell you that I have several clients where we did indeed receive NASA funding, and also an adjunct DARPA funding relative to esoteric topics such as geosynchronous platforms in orbit and other stuff, having big words as well. So don't worry about that. There will be monies available, the amount of which I cannot state right now, but I would assume, probably should never use the word assume, I would assume it would be equivalent or comparable to what we have for 2017.
Our next question comes from a faculty member who's interested in the development of educational-oriented services aimed to promote psychological well-being. Department of Ed is not part of STTR. Could this individual apply under Health and Human Services, which is part of the STTR program?
Yeah, since you use the word psychology, we can apply for that under NIH. By the way, any of you who are considering anything that is pertaining to healthcare, don't ignore the DoD. They invest a lot in healthcare. And in fact, my very first venture, way back in the olden days, pertaining to cervical and ovarian cancers, was funded exclusively by the DoD, in particular the Army Research Lab and so forth. So by all means, DoD for healthcare. NSF also will fund healthcare. So in addition to NIH, the answer is yes.
Great. Next question. If your idea stretches across multiple agencies, can you apply to more than one to improve your chances, or how does it actually work?
No, you cannot. We cannot submit the same proposal to different agencies. What we can do, however, is that if we are working on a particular initiative or venture, and we have different questions to ask, if we have a separate study that we would like to conduct and have funded, we can submit 2 separate proposals, but they have to have distinguishing characteristics. They cannot be the same one.
Okay, Jim asked, how is your IP protected from competitors?
Well, the agencies are obligated to not disclose your IP up to a specified period of time. It is somewhere between 4 and 6 years. And if you apply for subsequent phases, you can negotiate with the agency to keep your IP undisclosed and protected even longer. Now, with regard to the agencies having access to any IP or anything that is generated, they are restrained from and also do not have any interest in deploying your IP for commercial gain whatsoever. The only reason that they are interested in any of your information is just simply for recording of what topics have been funded and for how long and for what amount, those types of things. So I wouldn't sweat your IP. That being said, however, when you are applying for an SBIR or an STTR, I would make certain that at a bare minimum you have your provisional application taken care of, or that you have, before, if you can have your utility and or designs taken care of as well, all the better. Otherwise, when you are applying, you need to be very specific in terms of which sections of your proposal cannot, under any circumstances, be disclosed. That's contractual.
Okay, we're going to go a little overtime here. Normally we would jump off right now, but Martin, we have so many questions. I want to get through at least.
I'm here. Yeah, I'm here as long as you want or need me.
Martin, can you already be in the R&D phase and apply for a Phase 1 grant?
Absolutely, no question about it. I would say that at least 3/4 of my clients are already in R&D. Remember, yeah, you can be in R&D. You just may have a question that you would like answered, or a research initiative that your R&D may or may not be working on, but there is no reason why you cannot apply for an SBIR to help fortify the study or the research that you're working on that particular initiative. So no worries whatsoever. It's perfectly okay to be in R&D and apply for one or more SBIRs.
Martin, can a company work with more than one university for a proposal?
Yes. However, it gets kind of complicated when it comes to agreements for IP being generated. So rare is the case, but on the other hand, well, rare is the case, at least for me, where I've only done it once, where there was a particular individual, a co-PI, who had a particular interest and expertise in one particular subject matter, while at the other university there was another co-PI who had a particular interest in another indication, and so that individual was brought on board as well. It gets a little hairy, I have to caution you, in terms of agreements that have to be reached with your SBC, relative to your small business concern, relative to those universities. So in order to keep things simple and not too confusing and hopefully no conflicts down the road, I'd certainly avoid it, but it's okay to do it. It just makes things a heck of a lot more complicated.
Would the university claim ownership to the technology? In this case,
you have to sign, again, you have to sign an IP agreement before you even submit your proposal. So the university is going to negotiate with you a stake of some sort with IP generated from this project. You also will have, as part of that agreement, what intellectual property you already own, so that there is no confusion whatsoever. But for any time that you work with the university, there absolutely must be an agreement signed, sealed, and delivered by both of you.
And Martin, there's no restrictions for full-time employees of a California State University, which are generally not considered research universities. They can still qualify for an STTR.
Yes, That is true. Now, there are some Cal State universities that are getting into play. Down in my neck of the woods, San Diego State is one. But I would imagine there are other of the larger universities, perhaps Fresno State, perhaps San Jose State, and elsewhere, that are increasingly involved. I know SDSU, and it may indeed be the case with Fresno and San Jose, where they also have PhD programs. That being said, PhD is not required. But yeah, you can certainly work with Cal State universities. I am doing the same right now.
Last question. Where can I get help with applying for an SBIR?
I have no idea. God bless you. No. You can reach out to me. I told you I am a terrible joke teller. You're more than welcome to. You're more than welcome if you wish. You have my email address and you've got my telephone number. It'd be an honor. I'd be delighted. Hopefully, I would be able to be of some value and some help to you. So, if you have questions, reach out to me relative to that for help. And if I can't help you, I know people who can. So don't worry about that. Don't try to do this yourself, especially if you're a rookie, because it is almost guaranteed that we'll run into a brick wall somewhere if it's our first time. So, you know, in addition to yours truly here, I've got an incredibly sharp individual. Maybe some of you know Molly Schmid, but she's a brainiac, and she's really got this stuff nailed as well. So we're a 1-2 punch, but we'll make certain that you're taken care of. So you're not in this alone.
Well, great. And the last thing I might add to that is also, if you have a question or any question, SBIR or anything related, please contact one of your local 5 small business development centers throughout the Central California region. And that's it for today. That's our time for today. I'd like to thank Martin Kleckner, Dr. Martin Kleckner. Fantastic presentation on SBIR. There are SBI workshops that are coming online in the next 4 weeks that are major opportunities also to get more information. So stay by the email for that. And we'll be back next month with another webinar on supply chain management. So I'm Kelly Bearden from China Lake Naval Weapons Station this afternoon, joining Dr. Martin Kleckner. Wishing you a happy day, and goodbye, everybody.
And thank you. And by the way, whenever someone says doctor, I automatically look over my shoulder to see if my dad's walking in. So first name basis only for me. And
okay, doctor.
So thank you very much. I hope I was of some help today.
Don't forget your surveys, and if you want a copy of the presentation today, let us know. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you so much.